What's good, y'all? I'm Tavy. Welcome back to the channel. Y'all, they done got Diddy. Y'all remember when they raided his house a couple months back? Well, now they done arrested him. I have been blind to all the details of this arrest because I wanted to watch it with my people. So grab your drinks and let's react to some shit.
The Southern District of New York is promising justice for multiple victims who say that rapper, producer, businessman Combs used his power, influence, and wealth to intimidate them into doing his bidding.
Duh. Like, isn't that what Diddy's name is pretty much synonymous for? Diddy, intimidation. Diddy, dirty. Diddy, did he?
Whether that was obtaining drugs or performing sexually or cleaning up after apparent sex acts. Now, we've of course been reporting on Combs for months here on Sidebar. In November of last year, Cassandra Ventura, Cassie Combs' ex, filed a huge lawsuit against him, claiming that he abused her physically, sexually, emotionally for years before she was finally able to get away. Now, Combs denied everything she had to say in her filing. He settled the lawsuit with her just one day after it was filed, but we know that set off a chain reaction. Multiple other lawsuits against him and even against his son were filed, alleging sexual abuse, sex trafficking, illegal narcotics possession, violence. Then, in March of this year, Homeland Security agents, they show up at Combs' homes in both Miami and Los Angeles, search warrants in hand. They raided both locations, seemingly collecting a huge amount of evidence, which we will get through in a moment. And we learned at the time that this was connected to a sex trafficking investigation out of the Southern District of New York, but we didn't know all the exact details. Well, you fast forward to this week, and Combs was officially arrested Monday night at the Park Hyatt Hotel in New York out in Manhattan. According to his defense team, he had been booked there since September 5th, that was nearly 2 weeks ago, and he was in town in anticipation of the charges being filed, which is important because now that Combs has been arrested and charged, he says this is an example to show he's not a flight risk. He's been cooperative.
So, I wonder how he knew that the charges were about to be filed, one. Two, why was he trying to prove that he wasn't a flight risk? Like, oh, he was trying to make sure he had bail? I don't know which one is, like, what's the difference between the two? But that's my only guess, is he would make sure he was ready. But that's my only guess. He would make sure that he's readily available to be arrested so that they can trust that he won't be a flight risk. Oh, see, Diddy's still trying to be one step ahead.
However, when U.S. Attorney Damian Williams, again from the Southern District of New York, held a press conference and was asked about Combs' cooperation in this case, he seemed skeptical.
Let me just say this. I think that generally with increasing frequency, the word cooperative or cooperating has taken on tremendous elasticity, and it no longer really bears any relation to what the word means when we use it in a very specific context. So,
but he said he is, but he ain't. Like, the way I just took that is basically they can see that Diddy is only making cooperative moves if it's for his best interest. And I mean, aside for who we're talking about and what he did, isn't that how you would move? Like, wouldn't you set yourself up for the best possible outcome for yourself, not for the police? I might be getting too deep.
Prosecutors filed documents in federal court that lay out the accusations against Combs and his associates. Although, to be clear, Combs is the only one named in this filing for now. He faces 3 charges: racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, and transportation to engage in prostitution. Now,
they hit Diddy with a RICO? They hit Diddy with a RICO. Man, it's finna be a Young Thug times 5. Like,
During a hearing on Tuesday, Combs entered a not guilty plea to every charge. And if he is convicted of all charges, Combs faces a minimum of 15 years in prison with the possibility that the 54-year-old could spend the rest of his life behind bars. That's what...
Wait a minute. Wait. 15 years is an option? If he's convicted of all of this stuff? Like, I know it's only 3 charges, but this is schmexual. Y'all know how YouTube be tripping. But assault. So, I don't want to get too deep into like my feelings on jail time versus the crime and the imbalance between the two sometimes, but this is kind of mind-boggling that the option of him only spending 15 years in prison for these charges is out there. Now he might not get just 15 years, but just to know that that's an option is kind of wild to me. That's all I'm saying.
What we're talking about here. So we're going to break down each of these counts for you, as well as more on why Combs says he should be allowed out on bail while he waits trial. And let's start with the indictment. It's 14 pages, jam-packed with information. I want to hit the highlights. So first, right out of the gate, the government lays out some pretty damning accusations. Quote, for decades, Sean Combs, a.k.a. Puff Daddy, a.k.a. P. Diddy, a.k.a. P. D, Love, they, throughout the course of this indictment, refer to him by his many monikers, the defendant abused, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. To do so, Combs relied on the employees, resources, and influence of the multifaceted business empire that he led and controlled, creating a criminal enterprise whose members and associates engaged in and attempted to engage in, among other crimes, sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and obstruction of justice.
All I heard was those freak-offs were real. Like, were the freak-offs really? Like, okay, come on, y'all. Y'all have all heard about the quote-unquote freak-offs that Diddy had Carisha, a.k.a. Young Miami, involved in, but I'm not gonna lie, I was part of the small population that was like, man, this stuff is probably over exaggerated. Man, these are all grown people just doing grown people stuff. But no, like, this stuff was most likely, allegedly, happening. Whoa.
Which brings me now to count 1, racketeering conspiracy. So the main idea here is that there is a criminal agreement, an agreement to engage in racketeering. And racketeering is when there is a criminal enterprise, it's like organized crime, a grouping of people who break the law. They commit crimes. Now, it doesn't need to be Sean Combs Breaks the Law, LLC. You don't need an official company. Just an organized group of people, organized crime.
Oh.
And a criminal enterprise is supposed to have a common goal. So whether it was to benefit financially, whether it was to satisfy Sean Combs' sexual desires, whether it was to protect him, there has to be a common goal in mind. We're seeing this actually, I should say, in the Young Thug trial out of Georgia. Big thing for the prosecution is they have listed a number of different crimes. They're trying to say this wasn't done in an individual capacity, but it was done to further that gang. Similar idea here. Okay.
Thug done got chunky, y'all. Y'all like the weight gain? Oh yeah, we shouldn't be commenting on people's weight.
Now also, as you're going to see here, in a racketeering case, there are numerous predicate crimes. These are underlying crimes that Combs is not specifically charged with, like arson or kidnapping or forced labor, but they are crimes under the umbrella of the larger criminal enterprise. By the way, I should tell you, the racketeering allegations that we see in this indictment are very consistent with the allegations put forward by Rodney Little Rod Jones, Combs' former producer, who was one of the people that filed a sexual assault lawsuit against him and said there were violations of racketeering law. In fact, although no one is specifically named in this indictment, you can kind of see who those alleged victims of Combs are, their allegations, that they were the basis for the charges here, especially Cassandra Ventura. Because we all know that when that video back in 2016 was released by CNN a few months ago of Sean Combs purportedly beating Cassandra Ventura in a hotel elevator bank, that was publicized for the whole world to see, and he apologized for on Instagram. That is mentioned specifically in this indictment.
The crazy part about that is, prior to that video coming out, didn't he go on Instagram and say that all of this stuff Cassie was saying were lies and none of this ever happened, and this money grabs and all this stuff, just for a video to come out that proves that you're full of shit? He embarrassed himself. Like, once Cassie started talking, it was kind of over for Diddy. It felt that way. It definitely felt that way. Yeah.
Now, reading from the indictment, it says, quote, "The defendant and others, known and unknown, participated in unlawful and other activities related to the conduct of the Combs Enterprises affairs. These individuals included certain Combs business employees, such as members of Combs security staff, household staff, personal assistants, and high-ranking supervisors, as well as other close associates of Combs." Now, one of the most startling examples of Combs' alleged control over those around him came from the description of apparent sex parties called freak-offs. This is something that Ventura and others alleged in their lawsuits. What are they? Well, the indictment says Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise wielded the power and prestige of Combs' role at the Combs business to intimidate, threaten, and lure female victims into Combs' orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referred to as, among other things, freak-offs. Performances that Combs arranged, directed, I'm not going to say the next part, basically pleasured himself during, and often electronically recorded. In arranging these freak-offs, Combs, with the assistance of members and associates of the Combs enterprise, transported and caused to be transported commercial sex workers across state lines and internationally. Freak-offs occurred regularly, sometimes lasted multiple days, and often involved multiple commercial sex workers. So this is also kind of a flavor of the sex trafficking charge, which we'll get to a little bit later. During freak-offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes, unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept videos he filmed of victims engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. After freak-offs, Combs and the victims typically received IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and drug use.
What the hell is going on? Like, people need IVs when they leaving your house, bro? So that's why people have not been speaking. Because if you've noticed, a lot of the celebrities have been really hush-hush about Diddy. It doesn't seem like any of them are saying he was innocent. It doesn't seem like any of them are saying that he wasn't. It doesn't seem like anyone really condemned him. Anyone high profile, I'm going to say, condemned him when the video with the Cassie situation came out. I know recently Carisha has came out and, let me stop saying Carisha, Young Miami. I know she recently came out with her side of what was going on between her and Diddy. I'm not sure what side I'm on when it comes to that, because it seems like she was really tiptoeing around a couple of topics, and yeah, you can say that that's not the experience that I had. That's not the man he was when he was with me, but that does not mean you didn't know about what he had done or what he was doing to other women and men while he was dating you. I'm not going to say she knew. I just don't understand how you didn't. I just don't understand.
The indictment then provides more details about what Combs expected his employees to do before, during, and after these sessions.
Now, Combs did not do this all on his own. As I mentioned, Combs has been charged with RICO conspiracy. He used his business and employees of that business and other close associates to get his way. Those individuals allegedly included high-ranking supervisors in the business, personal assistants, security staff, and household staff. The indictment alleges that those individuals facilitated the freak-offs. They booked the hotel rooms and stocked them with the supplies, including drugs, baby oil, personal lubricant, extra linens, and lighting. When the hotel rooms got damaged, they helped clean it up. They arranged for victims and commercial sex workers to travel for the freak-offs, and they delivered large quantities of cash to Combs to pay for the commercial sex workers.
This ain't funny. Nothing about this is funny. It's just the word freak off keeps getting triggered in my head.
According to the indictment, in or about March of 2024, during searches of Combs' residences in Miami, Florida, and Los Angeles, California law enforcement seized various freak-off supplies, including narcotics and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant.
What the fuck, Diddy? Like, why do you... How often were you having these freak-offs? Do y'all know what 1,000 bottles of baby oil looks like? Honestly, one bottle of baby oil gonna last me about a year. A year. I think Diddy done reached villain status.
Wow, you talk about physical evidence here to prove these claims. Now, federal prosecutors allege that Combs used the threat of violence as well as actual assaults to keep his alleged victims in line. The indictment reads, quote, Combs maintained control over his victims through, among other things, physical violence, promises of career opportunities, granting and threatening to withhold financial support, and by other coercive means, including tracking their whereabouts, dictating the victim's appearance, monitoring their medical records, controlling their housing, and supplying them with controlled substances. During and separate from freak-offs, Combs, among other things, hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims at times by their hair. These assaults often resulted in injuries that took days or weeks to heal. Combs also threatened victims' careers and livelihoods, including if they resisted participating in freak-offs. So a majority of that indictment covers that first count, racketeering conspiracy. Now I want to talk quickly about the other two counts that he faces. So count 2 is a charge of sex trafficking of a victim by using force or coercion or fraud to have that person engage in commercial sex acts that are either for money or something of value is promised or given. And there were allegations that Combs had made promises,
why they keep showing the
opportunities,
same
and so forth to get what he
him?
wanted. And he's also charged with count 3, which is related to the transportation of people for purposes of prostitution. Now, quick side note about this. This is a comprehensive indictment, but it doesn't have a lot of details about what evidence prosecutors have to prove all of this. It also doesn't include every allegation that has been asserted against Combs in numerous civil complaints. For instance, there is nothing regarding minors. You know, there's been a lot of allegations that there were minors at these Combs parties, which we had heard before in these other allegations and these other complaints. Nothing about minors here. Now, Damian Williams, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, said that it's possible more charges could be on the way. He wouldn't confirm it one way or another, said nothing's off the table, so we don't know. But maybe there wasn't enough evidence to prove that there were minors at these parties or Combs did anything criminal related to minors. But
not only minors, right? I'm just getting this itching feeling that there might have been something regarding Kim Porter's mysterious death. I'm thinking there might be something involved with Biggie. What if they found stuff on Jay-Z? Like, think about it. They used to be really close. Really close. And now Jay's kind of been kind of quiet. Now, I'm not saying that don't shoot the messenger. I'm not saying that Jay is involved in any of this. But it's quite curiosity inducing. His actions, Jay-Z's actions this past year has been curiosity inducing. That's what we're gonna say, because he's been mighty quiet, mighty laid back, you know. What else is gonna come from this? Because it does not feel like it's just going to be these 3 counts. They're probably going to spoon feed us the evidence, because they've had their hands on this stuff since they raided his house a few months ago.
But I tell you what, we did get a lot more information from another filing from the prosecution. I'll get to that in a second. First, I have to get to the defense, because in a letter filed with the court on Tuesday, Combs' defense team laid out a proposed bail package for their client, why he should be released pending trial. And they explained why his actions over the last 6 months point toward cooperation, not avoidance. They also call out the government for seemingly making things more difficult than they had to be. His team writes, quote, "Through counsel, Mr. Combs promptly told the government that he had voluntarily come to New York, offered to tell them specifically where he was, and offered to turn himself in at the appropriate time. Even though Mr. Combs came to New York, authorized his lawyers to tell the government of his location, and offered to self-surrender, the government effected an arrest last evening. This, we know, is the government's right. However, that he traveled to New York to self-surrender is also something the court should consider." So what is this bail package that the defense outlines? Well, here are some of the main points. 1, a $50 million bond co-signed by Combs, his mother, his sister, the mother of his eldest daughter, and his 3 adult sons. That $50 million would be secured by the equity in Combs' Miami home. The appraised value of that home on Star Island is $48 million. So in other words, this is what he's saying. You can secure this. You can know that I'm not going to flee the country. I'm not going to break the bail conditions. I'm putting this home up. The defense says that Combs paid off the remaining mortgage, $18 million, so he could use it to secure a bond. The equity in his mother's home in Miami could also be used as collateral. And the letter goes on to say that Combs' travel would be restricted to the Southern District of Florida and the Southern District of New York. Combs apparently surrendered his passport to his attorneys right after the raids on his home, and several of his family members, including his children, have surrendered their passports too.
Did it say Love Combs at the bottom? Ain't that the new baby? Ain't that the new baby? They had to surrender the passport for the baby who's like 2? Oh my goodness. I don't know. This feels like a lot, because if all of that is true and that's what he offered up, he can't leave, right? Like, theoretically speaking, if our Department of Transportation does their job right, he shouldn't be able to leave this country. So why can't he get bail? $50 million bail. Jeez. And he had just paid $18 million on his home so he could use it as collateral. And he can still pay $50 million to get out, y'all. The life of the rich. The life of the rich.
Combs' counsel says he is currently working on selling his private plane, so he wouldn't be able to just jet off to some exotic locale that has no extradition with the United States. In the bail package information, it's also revealed that Combs wants to be under house arrest and would agree to GPS monitoring. The letter from Combs' attorneys also fires back at the assistant U.S. attorneys working on the case, saying they reached out to him in the days before the raids, but never got any reply. And then on March 25th, agents swooped in with a big show of force, which the attorneys insist was unnecessary. The filing also goes into Combs' philanthropic works, including his work with the Boys and Girls Club of America, his donations to open a charter school in New York, and his work fundraising to get PPE for frontline workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the end of the document, the defense team states Sean Combs has never evaded, avoided, eluded, or run from a challenge in his life. He will not start now. As he has handled every hardship, he will meet this case head on. He will work hard to defend himself, and he will prevail.
But didn't when they raided his home and his sons were there were rumors that he was like just jumping from place to place when that was happening? Or was that not true? I don't know. So many things were flying around Instagram when that was happening. Because some people were saying he was in, was it Jamaica? I can't remember where they said he was, but they were quote unquote monitoring his jets flight patterns, and he was supposedly going from place to place to place. But don't quote me because I'm pretty sure it was a rumor. And he said he never ran. So he also said that he never put hands on nobody. And then look, TMZ drops a video. So can we really trust anything this man says for real?
Now, the prosecution had a different view. So the prosecution team also sent a letter to the judge defending their assertion that Combs should be locked up with no bail. Their letter states, quote, "As reflected by the gravity of the charges in the indictment, the defendant is dangerous and poses an ongoing threat to the safety of the community. If released, he remains a serious risk of flight despite the conditions offered by his counsel. Most glaringly, the defendant also poses a significant risk of obstructing justice." The letter also goes into more detail about some of those specific situations that Combs was allegedly involved in that point to the lengths he would reportedly go to get what he wanted. For example, quote, "The defendant ensured the victims would participate in freak-offs through coercion and violence. For instance, the defendant provided controlled substances, including ketamine, ecstasy, GHB, to female victims so that they could and would continue to engage in freak-offs despite fatigue, physical and emotional exhaustion, and pain."
Damn. Despite fatigue, physical and emotional exhaustion, and pain. He said you gonna participate whether if you like it or not. That's actually kind of scary. But to touch on what they were just saying, that makes a lot of sense. Because initially I'm like, he's offering all of this stuff. He laying all this stuff up. He done gave up all of his family members' passports, along with his sons, signing on to make sure that he doesn't go anywhere, and all of this money. But they're right. Like, if he's out, he does have the ability to still puppet master either the victims, the witnesses, or just people who are testifying at all. I didn't even consider that. Wow.
Additionally, both during freak-offs and separate from freak-offs, the defendant subjected female victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse, in part to cause them to engage in freak-offs. The defendant hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged female victims, sometimes by their hair. At least a dozen witnesses will confirm that they personally observed the defendant's violence towards women and or the injuries sustained by women at the defendant's hand. Now, back to that 2016 video that I mentioned of Combs allegedly attacking Cassandra Ventura out in LA. They say in this letter, prosecution, they claim that Combs used money and influence to try to keep that video from getting out. Quote, "When a member of hotel security staff intervened, the defendant attempted to offer their hotel security officer a stack of cash to ensure his silence. After the security guard refused the defendant's bribe, and after coordination between the defendant and his employees, the defendant's staff contacted other members of hotel security. Within days of the incident, the surveillance video disappeared from the hotel's server." Now, this is the exact allegations put forward by Cassandra Ventura, which makes you wonder, is she one of the cooperating witnesses with the government? You have to believe so. And clearly, there is something to be said that the prosecutors here are believing the account of Ventura and possibly these other alleged victims. It's not just them filing a lawsuit against Sean Combs. They are believing these allegations to substantiate criminal charges. That's big. Now, the letter also references another alleged incident that was first revealed in Ventura's lawsuit last fall when she alleged that Combs set fire to fellow recording artist Kid Cudi's car when he seemed to show interest in Ventura. According to the filing, quote, in the early morning hours of December 22nd, 2011, the defendant and a co-conspirator kidnapped an individual at gunpoint to facilitate breaking into and entering the residence of individual one. Multiple witnesses would testify at trial to the events surrounding the kidnapping and break-in, the latter of which is corroborated by police reports and other records. Approximately 2 weeks later, the defendant's co-conspirator set fire to individual one's vehicle by slicing open the car's convertible top and dropping a Molotov cocktail inside the interior. Police and fire department reports extensively document the arson and conclude that the fire was intentionally set. Multiple witnesses would also testify to the defendant bragging about his role in destroying individual one's car. So again,
that's going to be his downfall. It's the fact that not only did Diddy possibly do all of this stuff and was doing a decent job at hiding it, at least from the law. Like I said, there were always rumors, but he's so egotistical that he has to make sure that people know what he's capable of. And that's why I think a lot of this is being found out about, and people aren't, I don't think people should let go of things that have happened to them. But do I think Diddy is the only guy in Hollywood, or even amongst only 10 guys? No, I don't. I think there are a lot more of them like Diddy. But I think the difference is with Diddy, he's just such a showboat, and he wants people to understand that he has the control and how far his control goes. And it's going to get him landing in jail. Landing straight in jail. It's literally in the indictment that he brags. How old are we?
In March of 2024, during searches of the defendant's residences in Miami, Florida, and Los Angeles, California, law enforcement seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 AR-15s, each with defaced serial numbers, as well as a large capacity drum magazine. As pictured in a close-up image, the serial number of one of the AR-15s is visibly bored through and obscured. By the way, that in and of itself is a federal crime. We did an episode about the recent potential shooting of former President Donald Trump. That individual is charged with that crime. The filing goes on to state, quote, 2 of the 3 defaced AR-15s were found in the defendant's Miami bedroom closet, stored broken down in parts, along with magazines that were loaded with ammunition. In addition, 6 legally purchased guns with serial numbers, some of which were stored in gun safes, were recovered from the defendant's residences. Now from there, in this bail letter, Combs is also accused of trying to influence witnesses. Prosecutors state, quote, specifically following the November 2023 lawsuit, the defendant and intermediaries acting on his behalf reached out to potential victims and witnesses to the alleged conduct, including individuals he did not speak to regularly and had not spoken to in years, to attempt to feed those victims and witnesses false narratives about the defendant's criminal conduct. For example, on or about November 19, 2023, just 3 days after the filing of the lawsuit described above, this is the Cassandra Ventura one, the defendant made multiple calls to another victim of his sexual abuse and recorded certain of those calls using the cell phone of a co-conspirator. During the calls, the defendant repeatedly asked for the victim's support and friendship and attempted to convince the victim that she had willingly engaged in acts constituting sexual abuse. The defendant also assured the victim that if she needed the defendant to, she ain't got to worry about nothing else.
So he called old girl and was like, yeah, forget about the stuff that I fed you that made you not remember this stuff. Forget the alcohol that I possibly pumped you with to loosen your inhibitions. Forget about all the forced activities that you had to partake in. You wanted to do all of this. You were part of the party. Nobody forced you to do anything. And if you say that, then you don't have to worry about anything else. And he's wondering why he doesn't get out of jail until his trial?
Quote, even more concerning since learning about the criminal investigation, including following the execution of the search warrants at his residences, Combs contacted other witnesses on multiple occasions, including other witnesses who had received grand jury subpoenas, basically accusing him of obstruction. And by the way, the prosecution also points out that many of the crimes that Combs is accused of happened in his home. So putting him on house arrest, they would say, doesn't do much to mitigate potential wrongdoing inside his residence. Now they talk about the weight of the evidence, how much they have. Remember I said there wasn't a lot in the indictment? Well, here they talk about the weight of the evidence as a factor to consider in whether to deny bail. Quote, as to witnesses, to date, the government has conducted interviews with over 50 victims and witnesses, many of whom saw or experienced the defendant's abuse. Many of these witnesses corroborate one another, and their accounts are consistent with the other types of evidence discussed below. The government only expects that number to continue to grow, given that the investigation, which is now public, is ongoing. And also, the prosecution revealed in its filing that the government has seized more than 90 cell phones, laptops, cloud storage accounts, hard drives, thumb drives, cameras, a surveillance system that they say shows this criminal activity. So based on that, we can assume that the evidence the Southern District of New York has against Combs is likely vast. Quote, the evidence also consists of physical evidence, which was seized pursuant to search warrants executed at the defendant's residences in Los Angeles and Miami, as well as on his person and the persons of certain co-conspirators. In addition to the firearms and electronics discussed above, the physical evidence also includes other evidence of freak-offs, including over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and personal lubricant.
They keep bringing that up.
Now, the prosecution ends their letter to the judge by saying, quote, there are no conditions of bail that would assure the appearance and compliance of the defendant or the safety of others. Accordingly, any application for bail should be denied.
I kind of agree now.
Sean Combs stood in Times Square and was handed a key to New York City. Today, he's been indicted and will face justice in the Southern District of New York. Second, we are not done. This investigation is ongoing, and I encourage anyone with information about this case to come forward and to do it quickly. Anyone with information can call 1-877-4HSI-TIP. I want to express my deep appreciation for the victims and witnesses who have used their voices and helped bring this criminal conduct to light. We would not be here without them.
So what happened? Well, there was a hearing in front of the Honorable Robin F. Tarnofsky, a magistrate judge from the Southern District of New York, and arguments for and against bail were put forward by the prosecution and the defense. And remember, there is actually a presumption of detainment in this case. And the judge reportedly said that after listening to all the evidence, that the presumption has not been rebutted, meaning that Sean Combs is denied bail. He must remain behind bars.
Damn.
She reportedly said there was a significant amount of violence and weapons. There was the allegation of coercion of witnesses. And even though she seemed to thank his family for coming, she cannot release him at this time. Now, we will, of course, keep you updated on any and all developments in this case of Sean Diddy Combs as it inches now even closer to a criminal trial.